My name is Morgan, and I once died, at least on paper. My own sister, Danielle, stood before the court and calmly declared that I was no longer alive, just so she could steal the $5 million I had won in the lottery. Sounds insane, right? But imagine this. You barely survive a horrific truck accident, your bones shattered, your body covered in blood, lying motionless in a hospital bed. And instead of being by your side, your family is busy forging your death certificate, freezing your bank accounts, and stealing the very house you just bought. The physical pain was unbearable, but nothing compared to the crushing truth. My own flesh and blood wanted to erase me from existence. I lay there, no visitors, no kind words, only the chilling realization. My sister wanted me gone forever. But Danielle forgot one thing. I was still breathing, and I was coming back. Not just to reclaim my life, but to rip the mask off everything she had been hiding. My story isn't just about betrayal. It's a chess match that went all the way to the final move. Stay with me until the end, because you'll see with your own eyes how I turned the tables and made my sister crumble in court. Don't forget to hit like, leave a comment about what shocked you most, and subscribe with the bell on so you won't miss the moment the full truth is revealed. I walked into the courtroom and my sister's world collapsed. Every tap of my crutch echoed across the polished wooden floor of the courtroom like a hammer striking my chest. Thud, thud. The sound rattled in everyone's ears. But for me, it was proof. Proof that I was alive. Proof that I was standing here, despite everything my sister had done to erase me. Every step sent fire through my ribs, pain shooting up my leg. But I didn't flinch. I refused to. I wanted her to see me walk in. I wanted Danielle's first glance upward to be the moment her entire world cracked open. And then it happened. Our eyes met. Her face, always polished, her hair perfectly curled, her navy suit sharp and smug, went pale. Every ounce of arrogance drained away in an instant. A shrill scream tore through the air. No, no, this can't be. It wasn't a gasp. It wasn't shock. It was the howl of someone staring at a ghost. The room went dead silent. Papers slipped from her hands and scattered across the floor. Danielle stumbled backward, collapsing into her chair before nearly sliding to the ground. A court officer rushed forward to hold her up. The judge's gavel slammed like thunder. Order! The court will have order! But I barely heard it. I kept my gaze locked on Danielle. Those eyes, eyes that had watched me since childhood, not with love, but with cold control. In that moment, decades of being belittled, silenced, and treated like a shadow hardened into something else. Strength. I stood there, leaning on my crutches, my body broken, but my stare burning like a storm. I'm alive, Danielle, and I'll never disappear the way you wanted. I didn't have to speak it out loud. She knew. I saw it in her trembling eyes, the panic peeling away every layer of her fake confidence. Her lawyer sat frozen, mouth open but no words coming out. The jurors shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other in disbelief, and then my lawyer, Mr. Bennett, stepped forward. His voice rang out, steady and unshakable. Your Honor, this is my client. She is alive. She has always been alive, despite the false claims and fraudulent evidence the plaintiff has submitted. The words dropped like a bomb. The judge turned toward Danielle. She was shaking, her knuckles white from gripping the table's edge as if she might drown. And I knew right then the elaborate scheme she had built was crumbling. But I was different. I had waited for this day. Every night in the hospital, I pictured this exact moment. The moment I would walk in and force my sister to realize that her game was over. As I moved slowly toward the witness stand, the entire courtroom held its breath with each step. Memories flooded back, the screech of metal on metal in the crash, the taste of blood, the suffocating darkness, and the crushing silence when no one from my family came to see me. Back then, I thought it was indifference, but no, it was part of the plan. A carefully crafted plan to erase me forever, so that the money, the house, the life I had built would all fall into her hands. The pain in my leg roared with every step, but I stood tall because this wasn't just a trial. This was the end of years of control. This was where the truth would be carved into stone, and this was where Danielle's empire would shatter. I tightened my grip on the crutch, looked straight at her, and whispered in my mind, "Today, your world ends, in front of everyone." But what I didn't realize was that just minutes later, the darkest secrets behind my accident and Danielle's real conspiracy would silence the courtroom all over again. The darkness of childhood, when I was just a shadow beside my sister. As I sat down at the witness stand, I could still hear the whispers circling the courtroom, the shock of my entrance not yet faded. But inside my mind, a different sound echoed back, the memory of a childhood I never truly escaped. I was born into a family where loyalty was preached, but in truth, control was the unspoken law. From the moment Danielle let out her first cry, my parents had decided she would be the star, and I would be nothing more than her shadow. The walls of our childhood home were covered with medals, certificates, and smiling portraits of Danielle. I still remember being 8 years old, asking my mom, "Mom, can I hang my drawing in the hallway too?" She smiled softly, shook her head, and said, "Sweetheart, that space is only for your sister's awards. You can hang your picture in your room." A gentle remark, yet sharp enough to carve itself into my heart. In this house, I would always be second. Danielle grew up accustomed to being first. As kids, she would snatch my toys, laughing, "You don't need as many toys as I do. I'll borrow them." And if I resisted, she would burst into tears. My parents' stern eyes would fall on me. "Morgan, let your sister have it. Don't upset her." So I learned silence. I learned to bow my head and step aside. But that sweet cruelty grew with time. Danielle no longer stole toys. She learned to steal trust. She whispered lies into our parents' ears. Morgan didn't do her homework. Morgan took my allowance. I tried to explain, but my parents' disappointed stares cut me down, while Danielle stood beside them, feigning sorrow. How bitter it felt, knowing my words would never outweigh a single fake tear from my sister. By the time we were teenagers, Danielle had perfected her craft. She didn't need to scream or lie outright. She chipped away at me with subtle, humiliating jabs. In front of relatives, she'd smile and sneer. "Morgan wants to be an office assistant." Well, at least it's a job that doesn't require much thinking. Everyone laughed. My throat tightened. My face burned. I wanted to fight back, but one look at my parents' eyes silenced me. My father once told me bluntly, "You should listen to Danielle. She knows what's best for you." And in that moment, I understood. To them, I wasn't an individual. I was just an accessory, adjusted, bent, and shaped to please Danielle. There were rare moments when I tried to stand on my own, like the time I rented my first tiny apartment. Danielle stepped in, wrinkling her nose. "This neighborhood is awful. You can't live here." And my mother immediately chimed in, "Listen to your sister. Move back home where it's safe." And just like that, I packed up, snuffing out the faint spark of independence I had fought for. Her cruelty wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was silence. If I defied her, Danielle would ignore me for weeks. And in those weeks, my parents would turn cold too, following her lead, leaving me suffocated in loneliness. I would surrender, not out of obedience, but because the silence felt like exile. In that family, Danielle was the sun. I was only allowed to orbit. Many nights, lying in the dark, I asked myself, why was I born just to be her shadow? What I didn't know then was that all those years of suffocation were only the prelude, a rehearsal for the betrayal to come. Because when I finally won $5 million in the lottery, the first thing in my life that was truly mine, Danielle made her decision. I was not allowed to exist anymore. And from that moment, the wheel of tragedy began to turn, carrying me toward that rainy night when a truck came speeding from behind. $5 million, dollars, and the price I paid for wanting freedom. That fateful night began with a crumpled lottery ticket I had always treated as a harmless ritual. Every weekend for years, I bought one, not because I expected to win, but because it gave me permission to dream. A little house with a garden, a dog, a trip somewhere far away where I wouldn't need to explain myself to anyone. And then, the day came. I was at the gas station when I pulled out the ticket and checked the numbers. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. One by one, the numbers matched. All of them. $5 million. I froze, my hand trembling as I clutched the paper, terrified that if I let go, it would vanish. I sat in my car for hours, staring into nothingness, with only one thought screaming inside my head. At last, my life will belong to me. For the first time, I felt I had the right to exist without Danielle's control. But that joy lasted less than 2 days. On Monday night, I got the call from the lottery office. They confirmed the win, asked me to come in. I opened my window wide, gulped in the city air, and let myself breathe like I was announcing the good news to the whole world. What I didn't know was that out there, in the shadows of the parking lot, Danielle was sitting in her car, and she heard everything. The next morning, my phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "We're all coming over tonight. We need to talk." I knew, Danielle knew. That evening, they walked into my apartment as if attending a board meeting. Danielle carried a thick leather binder, sat across from me with the poise of a corporate lawyer. My parents flanked her, faces grim, already briefed on what she was about to say. "Congratulations, Morgan," Danielle began, her smile thin as a razor. $5 million is no small amount. But for someone like you, with no financial experience, it's dangerous to keep it. I froze as she opened the binder, revealing charts, paperwork, documents already prepared. The smartest choice is to create a family trust. You hand the money to us. I'll be the trustee. It will be invested wisely, kept safe. You won't have to worry about anything. My father nodded approvingly. "Sounds reasonable. You shouldn't carry that burden." My mother chimed in. "Money brings trouble. Listen to your sister." The tea on the table had gone cold, but inside I was boiling. I took a deep breath, forced my voice steady. "No, I'll hire my own financial advisor. I want to manage my money myself." The room fell silent. Danielle's smile vanished. Her eyes darkened as her voice dropped lower. "You don't know what you're doing. You'll ruin everything. In a year, you'll be broke, crawling back here begging." I met her gaze. "Then that will be my failure, but it will be mine." It landed like a slap. Danielle's eyes turned to ice. She leaned in, whispered so only I could hear. "That money won't stay in your hands for long, Morgan." And my parents? They stayed silent, neither defending me nor opposing her. Their silence was their complicity. When they left, I sat in the suffocating dark for hours, my hands trembling on the table. For the first time, I saw it clearly. My independence wasn't just an insult to Danielle. It was a direct threat to the throne she had occupied her entire life. A week later, I signed the papers on my first home. It wasn't luxurious, but it had a white fence and sunlight that spilled across the porch in the afternoon. I walked in, heart soaring. Finally, this is mine. This is a beginning. But on the drive back to my old apartment, I noticed headlights in the mirror. A black truck, the beams blinding, the engine roaring closer. And then, Crash! Metal screamed. The world spun. Darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke in the hospital, the truth cut deeper than the pain. This wasn't an accident. It was a warning. Danielle would never let me step out of her shadow. But what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. Because while I lay immobile in that hospital bed, Danielle was already drafting my death certificate, erasing me, not just from her life, but from existence itself. The fatal crash and my family's cruel abandonment. When I opened my eyes, the harsh fluorescent lights above me buzzed like angry bees. My breathing was heavy, muffled beneath an oxygen mask, the stench of plastic and antiseptic filling my nose. My body felt crushed all over again, every breath sliced into my ribs like a knife. A gentle voice spoke. "You're safe now. You were in an accident, but you survived." I turned my head slightly, seeing a nurse bending over me. My voice rasped. "How long?" "2 days. You were in a coma for 2 days." I blinked. In my daze, the first reason forced out of me was, "My family, did they come?" The nurse hesitated, her eyes heavy with pity. She lowered her voice. "We called the emergency contact numbers, but no one came." My heart froze. I wanted to believe she was wrong, that at any moment the door would swing open, my mother would rush in sobbing, my father would grip my hand, Danielle would at least pretend to care. But no one came. Day after day passed. I woke in a sterile white room, surrounded by beeping machines and a suffocating emptiness. The doctors told me multiple rib fractures, my left leg shattered and held together by metal rods, and a concussion leaving me dizzy and plagued with headaches. "You're lucky to be alive," the doctor said. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt abandoned. I called Danielle, only voicemail. I left a trembling message. "Danielle, it's me. I need you. I had an accident. Please come." No response. I called my parents. The phone rang, then cut off. Finally, my mother texted 4 cold words. "Hope you get rest." I stared at them, hollow and detached, as if I were a stranger to her. Meanwhile, the bills piled up. I reached for my bank card to pay, but it was declined. I called the bank, struggling to hold the phone steady as the representative explained. "Your account is frozen due to legal documentation. We can't disclose more." Legal documentation? I had never owed anyone, never broken the law. Why was my account blocked? Curled on my hospital bed, I felt the world conspiring to erase me. I hadn't just lost my health. I had lost freedom, identity, the right to even exist. But then fragments of truth began to leak through. One night, a nurse named Carla adjusted my leg brace and whispered, "I saw your sister here a couple of times, but she never came in. She only spoke with administration, asked for your medical records." Strange. Usually family comes to see you, not just collect paperwork. My chest tightened. Danielle had been here, not to see me, but to take my records. For what? Before I could make sense of it, an old friend, Marcy, texted me. She'd overheard Danielle at a cafe, bragging, "Soon everything will be mine." When Marcy asked what she meant, Danielle smirked. "Morgan's no longer in the picture. I'm the one running the family now." I clenched my phone, fury and fear swirling together. Danielle's chilling words from our family meeting rang in my ears. "That money won't stay in your hands for long." My thoughts flashed back to that night, the blinding headlights, the engine that chased me. The impact, deliberate, precise, I hadn't wanted to admit it, but now a seed of suspicion grew into certainty. It wasn't an accident, it was an attack. On my 20th day in the hospital, a young orderly named Jim wheeled me to physical therapy. Casually, he said, "Funny thing, I saw your sister outside last week talking to a man leaning on a black truck. Its front was smashed in, like it had been in a crash. Didn't think much of it until I heard a truck driver died in a DUI accident afterward. My pulse thundered. A black truck. Damaged. A dead driver, conveniently after my accident. The pieces fit together, painting a nightmare I could no longer deny. Flat on my bed, pain clawing at my body, my mind blazed. Danielle thought I was helpless, trapped, alone, discarded. But in that suffocating solitude, I finally understood. If I didn't fight back, I would be erased forever. Forged papers. When I was declared dead while still alive. When I was healthy, I once hired a local lawyer, Mark Bennett, to review the contract for my very first house purchase. It was a simple deal, just a few dozen pages, but I wanted to be sure no one was taking advantage of me. When the matter was settled, he handed me his business card and said, "If you ever need the law on your side, don't hesitate to call me." At the time, I just gave a faint smile. I never imagined that tiny card would become the lifeline that saved my life. On the third week after the crash, as I lay pinned in bed with metal rods in my legs, the hospital door swung open. Mark walked in, tall, stern-faced, with his familiar leather briefcase. "Morgan," he said quietly, "I came as soon as I heard something strange about your legal records." I blinked at him, bewildered. "Legal records? What do you mean?" Mark sat down beside my bed, opened his case, and lowered his voice with steady weight. "Your name has appeared on an emergency guardianship petition filed by your sister. In it, you're described as incapacitated, unable to manage assets. Danielle is asking the court for full guardianship rights." I froze. My whole life, I had been treated as lesser, as someone who needed to obey, and now Danielle wanted the law itself to brand me. Useless. My voice shook. "But I'm conscious. I'm here." Mark's eyes softened. "I know, but if this petition is granted, you'll have no voice over the $5 million, the house, or anything else that's yours." I swallowed the pain rising in my chest, but Mark wasn't finished. He drew out another document. "And this is the worst part." I stared at it. My head spun. It was a death certificate. My name on it. Morgan Parker, deceased, cause of death, automobile accident. The words tumbled from my lips. "Am I dead?" Mark's voice was firm. "On paper, yes. Danielle submitted this to both the bank and the state lottery office. Your accounts are frozen, your winnings suspended." Tears blurred my vision. Betrayal had never cut this deep. I was still breathing, still clinging to life. Yet my own sister had erased me. Mark flipped to yet another file, a deed transfer. At the bottom, a forged signature, Morgan Parker. "According to this, you voluntarily signed your house over to Danielle in exchange for lifetime care. The signature is clever, but not clever enough. I've already verified. It's fraud." I stared at the fake signature, smooth, tidy strokes, nothing like my real mark, always ending with a sharp upward flick. Danielle didn't just want money. She wanted the home, the fragile dream of freedom I had built for myself. A broken laugh slipped through my tears. All my life, she's taken everything from me. And now she wants to take even my existence. Mark's expression hardened. "Morgan, this isn't mere greed. This is a systematized plan to erase you. On paper, in the law, in society's eyes. If we don't fight back, she'll succeed." I clenched my fist, ignoring the ache in my bones. Memories surged, toys ripped away. My first apartment surrendered. The words my parents repeated, "Listen to your sister." I had swallowed silence all my life, but not this time. I locked eyes with Mark. "We fight. I want everything dragged into the light, not just to keep my money or my home, but to prove I still exist." Mark nodded, closing the file with finality. Good. I'll hire a private investigator to track Danielle. And Morgan, you need to be ready. This won't be easy. But with patience, we'll bury her in her own trail of evidence. That he packed his case, but before leaving, turned back and said, voice ironclad, you are not alone, Morgan. You are alive. And that fact, your very existence, will be our sharpest weapon against your sister. The room fell silent once he left, but inside me, something ignited. Danielle may have killed me on paper, but the truth was undeniable. I was still breathing, and as long as I lived, I would not let the world erase me. The counterattack, when I turned my sister's game against her. When I discovered that Danielle had forged documents to declare me dead, I knew I could no longer lie still and wait. My whole life I had been forced to step back, but this time, if I stayed silent, I would truly disappear. And I swore that would never happen. I called Mark, my voice trembling but firm. We have to fight back. I want to know everything. I want the truth dragged into the light. Mark's eyes sharpened with resolve. All right, I'll bring in a private investigator. If Danielle was behind that crash, we'll find out. A few days later, a woman named Carla Morris walked into my hospital room. Her stance was steady, her eyes cold and piercing. Carla was a private detective who had worked with Mark on many difficult cases. Morgan, she said, her low voice deliberate, if your sister is guilty, I'll find the evidence, but you need to be ready. The truth might hurt more than you think. I nodded. Pain was nothing new to me. A week later, Carla returned. She laid out photographs and papers on the table. My heart nearly stopped when I saw them. Danielle met multiple times with Thomas Kerr, the manager of a local trucking company. The company owns several heavy rigs, one of which is black with a damaged front. Employees confirmed Thomas is married to Danielle's best friend, and 3 days before your crash, Danielle withdrew $5,000 in cash. Carla's gaze locked onto mine. I believe that money was paid to Kerr to arrange the collision. The driver of the truck died in another crash just days later, a suspicious one, as if someone wanted to erase the trail. The blood in my veins turned to ice. The room blurred around me. The accident hadn't been an accident at all. It was a blood contract, and I was the target. I whispered, she really wanted me dead. Carla pressed a hand against the folder. Not just wanted, she put a price on it. But Morgan, we need her own words. Only if she admits it herself will the court be forced to corner her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought of all the years spent as her shadow, the times my parents forced me to bow my head, the moment Danielle stared straight into my eyes and said, "You won't keep the money." It all twisted into a single resolution. I would make her trap herself with her arrogance. The plan was set. I asked my closest friend, Marcy, to send Danielle a text from her phone. Morgan woke up. She remembers everything. You should come before she tells anyone. I knew Danielle too well. She would never miss a chance to control the narrative. The next afternoon, I heard heels clicking down the hallway. The door burst open. Danielle entered, carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers, her smile plastered on like cheap paint. Oh, Morgan, you look better than I expected. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes darted, calculating every detail in the room. I stayed seated on the bed, staring at her. Why haven't you come before now? Danielle sighed, lowering herself into a chair. I've been busy. I've had to manage everything for you. You should be grateful, Morgan. No one else is keeping things in order. I tilted my head, swallowing fury. In order? You mean the frozen bank accounts? The lottery office delay? Or the death certificate that says I'm already gone? Her face flickered, but she quickly smoothed it over with a thin smile. You always imagine too much. You should rest. Stop listening to rumors. My voice dropped, heavy as stone. I don't need explanations. I have evidence, but I want to hear it from your mouth. What you've done. Her eyes flashed with rage. She sprang to her feet, leaned over me, and hissed, "You were supposed to be gone, Morgan. The fact that you're still breathing only makes things worse for you." Every word cut like a blade, but I didn't flinch because I knew the tiny hidden camera in the room was recording every syllable. Danielle spun on her heel, her footsteps cracking against the sterile tile. The bouquet she brought in lay abandoned on the table, a symbol of her hollow disguise. The moment her steps faded, I signaled Carla. She checked the device. The footage was crystal clear, every word intact. I sent it straight to Mark. His reply came almost instantly. "Perfect. This is the kill shot. But let her tighten the rope herself. The more evidence, the stronger the conviction." I leaned back into my pillow, pain still gnawing at my legs, but something fierce burned inside me. Danielle had wanted me erased, but in that moment I knew my existence itself would be her heaviest sentence, the day of reckoning, when truth shattered every lie. That day I will never forget. The day when justice and darkness wrestled in the same room. The sky was a cold, pale blue, with no warmth in its light. I stepped out of the car on crutches, wearing a plain black dress that covered the wounds still aching beneath. Every step was pain, but I would not let it bow me down. I wanted Danielle to see me, flesh and blood, alive and unbroken. The courtroom was packed. Whispers filled the air the moment I walked in. Everyone who had heard I was dead now stared at me in disbelief. And then, Danielle's eyes met mine. She froze. Her face went pale in an instant. The tailored suit, the perfectly styled hair could not mask the flicker of panic that crossed her features. She didn't scream like the first time, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the table. Attorney Mark gently guided me into my seat, whispering, "Just breathe, Morgan. Today will be your day." The judge's gavel struck. His voice rang out stern and commanding. "Court is now in session." Mark began, his voice low but clear. "Your Honor, my client, Morgan Parker, is not only alive, but she is the victim of a calculated scheme of fraud, forgery, and attempted murder. Today, we will present the entire truth." The room fell silent. At his signal, the screen lit up. The hidden hospital footage began to play. Danielle sat beside my hospital bed, her face composed, her voice dripping with false sweetness, until she leaned close and whispered, "You should have disappeared already, Morgan." The words echoed through the chamber. Gasps rippled across the room. Members of the jury covered their mouths. Danielle sat stiff, her cheeks flushed red, her eyes darting wildly. "Let the court take note," Mark pressed. "These are not fabricated words. This is Danielle Parker herself, captured clearly and undeniably." He moved on, presenting the forged death certificate. A blown-up copy was placed before the jury. My name, the date, the cause listed as traffic accident. While my client lay alive but gravely injured in the hospital, her own sister submitted this certificate to the bank and the lottery office in an attempt to seize $5 million. Outrage murmurs swelled louder. Several people shook their heads in disgust. Next came the fraudulent property transfer. Mark pointed to the forged signature. "This is not Morgan's handwriting. Experts have confirmed it. And note the date, one day after the so-called accident, when my client was still in a coma. This document proves premeditation." I sat gripping my crutch, listening as each piece of my nightmare was laid bare, the fragments finally piecing into a picture of betrayal too sharp to ignore. Mark pressed on. He placed bank records on the table. "This is a withdrawal of $5,000 made by Danielle Parker 3 days before the crash. Now, hear the investigator's testimony." Carla stepped onto the witness stand, steady and firm. She recounted tailing Danielle, meeting with Thomas Kerr, the transport company manager. She showed photos, statements, reports of the black truck with a damaged front. I believe that $5,000 was payment for orchestrating the crash. The truck's driver died in another collision days later. Suspicious circumstances, consistent with covering up loose ends. The air was thick, suffocating. The jury whispered to one another, faces grim. Danielle's attorney shot up, his voice trembling. "This is speculation. There is no direct evidence tying my client to the crash." But Mark replied calmly, "Then let us return to the video, Danielle's own words, and when combined with fraudulent documents, financial records, and her connections, the pattern is undeniable." The judge struck his gavel. "Objection overruled. Proceed." Then it was my turn. I was called to the stand. Each step was slow, deliberate, my eyes never leaving Danielle. The room held its breath. I told them about the crash, the roar of the engine, the blinding headlights, the violent impact. I told them about the lonely hospital days, calling my family and hearing only silence. I told them about the bank accounts frozen, the death certificate in my name. My voice shook, but I held back the tears. I wanted them to see me not as a victim, but as a survivor. Danielle's lawyer tried to claw back control. "Perhaps Ms. Parker is exaggerating. Perhaps the crash was random. Perhaps the paperwork was clerical error." I stared straight into his eyes, then pointed at Danielle. "Then why did she say, 'You should have disappeared already'? Tell me, counsel, is that a clerical error or a guilty conscience?" The courtroom erupted. Danielle blanched, biting down hard on her lip. Finally, after hours of evidence and argument, the judge delivered his ruling. The jury finds Danielle Parker guilty of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. Furthermore, the crash will be investigated by the criminal division as an attempted homicide. The gavel thundered. Danielle collapsed into her chair, trembling. As police moved to cuff her, she looked back at me, her eyes brimming with fear, an expression I had never once seen on the face of the sister who thought herself untouchable. The chamber broke into murmurs, half in shock, half in relief. I didn't feel triumph, only a release, like chains snapping after years of silent captivity. For so long, I lived in her shadow. But that day, I stood tall and I exposed the truth. I walked out of the courthouse into the cold afternoon light. Not the warm glow of victory, but the light of freedom. Freedom after years of being caged by her control. After the trial. When justice isn't enough to heal. The trial ended. Danielle was led out in handcuffs under the furious stares of the crowd. The whispers, the clicking of cameras, the echo of the judge's gavel still rang in my head like aftershocks. News spread quickly. Headlines flooded the media. Sister fakes sibling's death to steal fortune, and survivor returns to expose the truth. But for me, nothing about it felt glamorous. I didn't feel victorious. I only felt drained. In the days that followed, police arrested those connected to her. Thomas Kerr, the trucking company manager, was interrogated. Suspicious financial transactions surfaced. Other links in the chain were revealed. Danielle hadn't acted alone. She had built a network of people willing to forge, conceal, even kill for money. I will never forget the moment the police called me. "Ms. Morgan, we've frozen all the assets Danielle seized. Your house will be returned to its original state. The $5 million now belongs to you." I smiled faintly, but the smile vanished almost instantly. $5 million. The house. These were the very things Danielle believed could erase me from existence. Now they were mine again, but they brought me no joy. What I wanted wasn't wealth. What I needed was a life free of control, free of being treated as expendable. The day I returned to the old house, the familiarity stung. The wooden door Danielle had tried to steal with forged papers. The kitchen where we once ate dinner as children. The sofa where I curled up, small and shivering, as our parents scolded me. I laid my hand against the wall. Its chill reminded me this place carried too many memories that could never be scrubbed clean. Attorney Mark came by, placing a folder on the table. "You've won, Morgan. Your identity has been restored. You are no longer just a survivor. You are a victor." I looked at him, then shook my head. "Victory? That's not how it feels, Mark. It feels like I just escaped a cage, but no court ruling can erase the scars inside." He was silent for a moment, then nodded. Maybe he understood. In the days that followed, I began the legal process to reclaim my records. The false death certificate was voided. My name was removed from the list of the deceased. On paper, I had come back to life, proof that Danielle had failed to erase me. But when I saw my name printed on the new documents, I broke down in tears. Not because I was happy, but because I realized how much I had to fight just to keep my right to exist. One afternoon, I walked through the park, watching children laugh and play. I asked myself, why must some people pay in blood and tears just to prove they deserve to live? I knew many expected me to feel triumphant when Danielle was arrested, to relish the return of my house and fortune. But the truth is, I only felt relief. Relief that the years of being under her grip were over. Relief that I no longer had to live in fear of a single phone call stripping everything away. I sat alone in the living room, afternoon sunlight spilling through the window. On the table lay an old notebook where I had once scribbled small dreams. To study far from home, to choose my own career, to live like a normal human being. Now, for the first time, those dreams felt within reach. A new life and the lessons learned. After all those months fighting between life and death, between being erased and reclaiming my right to exist, I finally stepped into a new chapter of my life. I got back the money, I got back the house, but I knew material possessions would never be enough to heal the scars on my soul. That's why I decided to use part of that money for a purpose greater than myself. I reached out to an organization that protects and supports victims of domestic violence. It was a place where those betrayed by their own blood relatives could find a lifeline. When I handed over the donation check, my hand trembled, but my heart filled with a quiet comfort. I could not change what had happened to me, but I could help ensure that others wouldn't have to endure the same. A new life slowly unfolded. I began rebuilding the connections I once lost. Old friends who had distanced themselves when they believed I was gone returned, hugging me through tears. At first, I was hesitant, afraid of being betrayed again. But little by little, I learned to open up, to trust once more. And then I realized something. We need each other. And sometimes true family is not bound by blood, but by those who are willing to hold your hand when you collapse. I understood more deeply than ever that what we often call family is not always love. Sometimes it's the chains of toxic control. I had spent half my life trying to please them, but in the end, I learned protecting yourself is not betrayal. It is survival. Every morning, I look in the mirror and see eyes that no longer carry the panic of the past. Now they hold a steady strength. I have lost so much, but the most important thing I preserved was myself. As I walk down familiar streets, the wind brushing through my hair, I tell myself, I am no longer a victim. I am a living witness, proof that truth and resilience will always prevail. My story ends here, but maybe yours is just beginning. If you believe truth deserves to be heard, if you believe no one has the right to erase another's existence, then please hit like on this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts, because who knows, Your words might become the light for someone still trapped in the dark. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the stories that can truly change the way we see life. Because every time we raise our voices, darkness is pushed back.